Okay, I'm Marian Shapiro. I'm an adopted Australian, which is why I don't sound like one. And this is a quick, I hope, overview of 13 years of making stuff. People often ask me, basically how I got started, and a lot of it goes back to my mother's button box. I used to play with shapes and colours and form and, take things apart and put them back together again, and I still do that. When I started, I really got caught up with the materials and the shiny stuff and the pretty stuff and the, contrast between the shiny and the matte and colourful and not colourful and stuff like that. And I started to work in series because I discovered that I could actually explore an idea more successfully if I did more than one of them. And it also became important to me to work with at least a little bit of a concept so that I had an idea that I could work from. And this was about taking jewellery where I had orphaned earrings, so I'd lost one, do that a lot, and then giving something that, didn't have value anymore, some value. Oh, that one's gone a bit funny in the translation, but this is part to Mac from PC, I think. But this is part of a series called Forbidden Fruit, where I took forms which were inspired by nature but not limited by it. And it was my first foray into 3D. And also it allowed me to be a bit whimsical and pretty, which, I don't normally do that, but it was a nice way to, explore those aspects. And I really like a verbal or a visual pun or a double meaning or some kind of ambiguity. And this is part of a series called Fabrication, which is a pun in itself. And what I loved about this was the ability to make something that looked as if it was soft and flowing and about to jump off the wall out of material that is rigid and hard and made of, glass and stone. And the other thing that pleased me about it was people's reactions to it. So from a distance, people would look at these and they'd come up and touch them and go, oh, it's not material. Well, it is, it's a different sort of material, and that was always quite pleasing. These little series were not necessarily consecutive. I'd be working on one and working on another at the same time, and they'd overlap. And this was a much more simpler and quiet period where these little studies, they're only 20 centimetres square, were basically just about colour and emotion and, a little bit of movement, just to see what I could do with stripping things down, because I do tend to overcomplicate things sometimes. And the next series coming up, I think, illustrates that. So this was a very simple, quiet, calm piece. And then I just got a bit more complex with this lot. This was a whole series on DNA, where I was exploring different ways of representing DNA, and this one concentrated on the helical form, so the double helix and what you could do with that. And then the other thing about DNA is it's represented when you see the genome printed out with the 4 letters CGAT, which stand for the first letters of the proteins that make up the chain. And what I started to do with these was to take the colours and code them against the letters. So green was G, and so on. And that was the same, but with the shape. So I had rules. So I had to follow a certain pattern or a certain colour sequence, and then that freed me to do, see what I could do with the bit that I wasn't rule-bound, and it was a very interesting experience. And the next series coming up is from a series called Trace Memories, which again comes back to ideas of value and of representation. And the starting point for those, my starting concept, was paper. Crumpled paper, paper that's been written on, paper that's been torn, thrown away, maybe taken back out of the bin, unfolded. And in that particular one, also giving value to material. That's really cheap white tile that's been chucked out, and I've used the back of it. So the material also I hope resonated with the form that I was making it take. And then I started looking at endangered animals and endangered species in Australia. and making origami models of them, unfolding the origami, and then the fold lines that were left, those became my rules for the form of the mosaic. And the colour was dictated to me by the colour of the animal. So again, I had a little area of freedom that I could work within, but the rest I'd kind of imposed these external rules on myself. That's a flame-bellied parrot, by the way, which of course you'd get that. It's to do with the colours that I used there. It was a very kind of interesting series to work with. That's a corroboree frog, which is a very bright black and yellow and is critically endangered in New South Wales, where I live. And again, the colours were dictated to me by the animal, the lines by the origami fold, and those black kind of V shapes are the pattern of the frog itself. And then the final one from this series is called Lost, and it's the Tasmanian tiger, which was made extinct by human action entirely in the 1930s, and is now really, you know, it's trapped in its little specimen box, and it's open to us, it's available to us now only by memory and representation. And the last two, last October I became a little bit depressed about the state of the world, and this is a series called Unravelling, where this feeling, you know, of things beginning to fall apart a bit. And I was kind of seeing how I could take that and still maybe make it beautiful and interesting as well as depressing. And this last one is called Andum Entropy, which is a pun on andamento and entropy, which is about the tendency of the universe to fall apart. And it's also an exploration of the relationship between the tesserae, the mortar, and the substrate. And that's me.